Atlanta sells itself as the New South, airport of the world, cradle of civil rights. Its killers found cover in that. Most were stopped by luck, not detective work. From 20 women with their throats cut in 1911 to a preacher poisoned by his own wife, this is every serial killer Atlanta produced, and what finally stopped them. Section 1. The Atlanta Ripper, 1911. Late on a Saturday night in May of 1911, the eastern edge of Atlanta went quiet in stages. Freight moved on the Southern Railway. Past the last paved block, cooks and laundresses who had spent 14 hours in white households across town were walking home along dirt lanes with no lights, no streetcar fare, and no company. One of them was a woman named Mary Walker, known to everyone as Belle, who worked in a private home on Cooper Street. She never reached her door on Garibaldi Street. Her sister found her the next morning, 25 yards from the house, with her throat cut in a ragged line. The city newspaper gave her 2 paragraphs on page 7. 3 weeks later, Addie Watts was found in shrubbery near Krog and DeKalb Streets, close to the railway. Her head had been beaten with a brick, then with a coupling pin taken from a rail car, and her throat was opened. 9 days after that came Lizzie Watts, no relation, near White and Lawton Streets, killed the same way and dragged into bushes. Lena Sharp died on the 1st of July near Hanover Street and the Seaboard Line. Her daughter Emma Lou was stabbed the same evening and lived. She described a tall, heavily built black man, neatly dressed, wearing a broad-brimmed hat. That description is almost the whole of what was ever learned. By the middle of July, when Sadie Holly was found in a gully near Atlanta Avenue and Martin Street with her skull fractured and her shoes removed, the papers finally moved the story to the front page. Sources put the total at 15 to 21 women, with some counts running higher and stretching the dates from 1909 into the middle of the decade. The pattern held with unusual consistency. Saturday night, a woman walking alone, a blow from behind, a move to somewhere secluded, the throat cut, the body left where it would be found by daylight. What allowed it to continue was not cunning. Atlanta in 1911 had no fingerprint system worth the name, no blood typing, no way to link one scene to another except by reading the wounds. It also had a press and a police force that had spent the years since the 1906 race riot treating black lives as a lesser class of loss. Churches and community leaders raised reward money themselves because the city would not. Men were arrested and let go, among them Henry Huff and Todd Henderson. In March of 1912, a Fulton County grand jury reached the conclusion that each of the killings had been committed by a different man. No explanation was ever offered for how that finding was reached, and no one was convicted of any of them. The murders slowed and then stopped, and the file closed itself. 20 women, and not one name of a killer. By 1912, the Ripper had vanished into a city that barely wrote his victims down. 40 years later, Atlanta produced a killer who worked indoors, at a kitchen table, one spoonful at a time. Section 2. Roberta Elder, the poisoner on Eason Street. Eason Street ran through a black working neighborhood on Atlanta's west side, a row of small frame houses with narrow porches and shared water lines. In the summer of 1952, a Baptist preacher named William Elder left one of those houses for a construction job, carrying a lunch his wife had made for him, bananas and cheese. He grew ill at work, was sent home, and was cared for there by the woman who had packed it. A doctor was called back on the 21st of August. Elder died that same day, in his own bed, and the doctor refused to sign the certificate. The Fulton County coroner examined the body and found 2 things that did not sit together. The skin had a brick-red cast that suggested severe internal bleeding. The frame underneath was wasted and thin. Both signs pointed toward pneumonia, and pneumonia was exactly what had been written on the death certificates of 2 of the preacher's daughters in the years just before. Annie Pearl, aged 9, had died in January of 1951. Fannie Mae, 15, had died the year after. The coroner remembered them because they had come through the same office. He ordered a test for arsenic and found it. Both girls were exhumed. Both carried arsenic as well. That was the moment the household stopped being a series of misfortunes and became a case. A city detective compiled a list of deaths connected to the woman of the house, Roberta Elder, and the list ran back 14 years. Her first husband, dead in 1938 at 36. a 13-year-old son months later, a grandson, aged 2, in 1941, her own mother, 2 later husbands, stepchildren, a cousin. The causes recorded across them were pneumonia, kidney failure, and ordinary food poisoning. The coroner concluded that every one of those presentations was consistent with arsenic given slowly, over weeks, in food. Police put the possible total at 13. Newspapers of the day called it the largest murder investigation in Georgia's history, and officers referred to her throughout as Mrs. Bluebeard, after the fairy tale. Insurance was the thread underneath it. She had taken policies on most of the dead. Sources disagree on the sums, with some reporting figures as low as $50 and others running to $3,000, and she collected on them. The prosecution never proved she bought arsenic anywhere. Her stepchildren believed it came from a brother's farm. She was arrested in late September of 1952 and indicted on 3 counts. The state tried her on 1. In 1953, a jury convicted her of murdering her husband, and she was sentenced to life. Because the case rested entirely on circumstance, the prosecutor said openly that the electric chair had been out of reach from the start. She never admitted anything. 12 or more deaths and 1 conviction. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. A coroner's hunch closed the Eason Street house. 27 years later, the killings in Atlanta stopped being private, and the whole country started watching. Section 3. Yusuf Bell and the Errand on McDaniel Street. On the 28th of July 1979, 2 boys were found in a wooded strip off Niskey Lake Road in southwest Atlanta. Edward Smith, 14, had been shot in the upper back with a small caliber round. Alfred Evans, 13, had been strangled. They had gone missing 4 days apart in the same summer heat, and nobody linked them to anything yet. There was no list. There would be, and their 2 names would sit at the top of it. The pattern took shape slowly through errands. Milton Harvey, 14, was riding a bike to the bank for his mother in September when he disappeared. In October, 9-year-old Yusuf Bell was sent to Reese Grocery on McDaniel Street to buy snuff for a neighbor. A witness saw him get into a blue car at McDaniel and Fulton. He was found on the 8th of November inside the abandoned E.P. Johnson Elementary School by a janitor looking for somewhere to relieve himself. He had been struck twice on the head and strangled, and a piece of masking tape was stuck to his shorts. March of 1980 brought the first girl. Angel Lanier, 12, left home in a denim outfit and was last seen at a friend's house watching television. Her body was found 6 days later on a vacant lot along Campbellton Road, hands bound with electrical cord, underwear that was not hers pushed into her mouth. 1 week after her, 11-year-old Jeffrey Mathis vanished on an errand. He was not found for 11 months, by which point no cause of death could be established at all. That was the quiet cruelty of the sequence. Children left home for a shop, a pool, a recreation center, and reappeared as skeletal remains in briar patches, under bridges, behind dumpsters, on riverbanks. LaTanya Wilson was 7, lifted from her parents' apartment through a window. Darren Glass was 10 and has never been found. An investigator named Chet Detlinger did the one thing the age allowed. He mapped it. The victims spread across 4 counties and ranged from 7 years old to 28, which made the case look incoherent, until the map showed nearly all of them falling along Memorial Drive and 11 other major streets. The ages varied, the geography did not. By 1981, the count had passed 20, and the city had lost its footing. Curfews were set. Parents pulled children from school and kept them off the pavement. More than 100 agents were working the case. The victims were still, without exception, young and black and poor, and by spring the bodies had begun turning up in water. At least 28 dead in 22 months. 30 names on the final list. The bodies in the river were not carelessness. They were a decision, and the FBI worked out what it meant before the killer did. Section 4. Wayne Williams and the Fibers. Just after 2 in the morning, on the 22nd of May 1981, a recruit officer was sitting in the dark, under the James Jackson Parkway Bridge, where the road crosses the Chattahoochee River, on the western edge of the city. He was one of a dozen such stakeouts. The FBI had reasoned that a killer who kept losing hair and fiber traces to the woods would eventually work out that running water solves that problem, and had put men under the bridges to wait for it. What the officer heard was a loud splash. What his colleague on the bridge above saw was a white 1970 Chevrolet station wagon slowing, turning, and coming back across. 2 patrol cars stopped the wagon about half a mile on. The driver was 23, a freelance photographer, and would-be music promoter named Wayne Bertram Williams, driving his parents' car. He said he was on his way to Smyrna to audition a singer called Cheryl Johnson. No such woman and no such appointment was ever traced. Officers noted gloves and a 2-foot length of nylon cord on the passenger seat, similar to the ligature marks on several victims. The cord was never taken into evidence. 2 days later, the body of Nathaniel Cater, 27, surfaced downstream. A gardener had seen him at the entrance of the Rialto Theater on the night he died, holding hands with Williams. Williams was arrested on the 21st of June and indicted for the murders of Cater and of Jimmy Ray Payne, 21. Both were adults. Neither was a child. The trial opened on the 6th of January 1982 before Judge Clarence Cooper, and the case the state built rested on textiles. Fibers from a bedroom carpet in the Williams house matched fibers taken from victims. So did fibers from the vehicles, and hairs from the family dog. Prosecutors were permitted to introduce 12 further killings as pattern cases, so that a jury trying 2 deaths heard evidence about 14. The weakness sat inside the strength. 2 agents testified that it was virtually impossible the victims had not been in contact with Williams, an assertion resting on how rare the carpet fiber was, not on any direct proof. Sources note that a Georgia Supreme Court justice later judged that reasoning inadmissible, and that in some courts the presentation might have brought a mistrial. After 11 hours, on the 27th of February, the jury convicted him on both counts, 2 consecutive life terms. Police then attributed 22 more deaths to him without charging him for any. He has appealed continuously and maintains his innocence. Later, mitochondrial testing on the dog hairs and 2 human hairs failed to exclude him and could not confirm him either. Atlanta reopened the evidence in 2019 and has published nothing since. 2 convictions, 30 names. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Fiber analysis closed the case the city remembers. 4 years later, a killer worked the same streets for 11 months, while 6 deaths sat in 6 separate files. Section 5. Michael Terry and the 6 Files. The blocks around Georgia Baptist Hospital and Martin Luther King Jr. Drive had their own late shift in the mid-1980s. Young men without addresses worked the pavement there after the buses thinned out, selling what they had to men in parked cars. It was a trade that produced no paperwork and left no one to report a person missing. A man could lean against a wall on that stretch and simply wait to be approached, which is exactly what a tire shop worker from a rooming house on Kennesaw Avenue learned to do. He never solicited. He let the offer come to him, then chose, then drove somewhere dark. Richard Williams, 24, was found on the 6th of December 1985 in a vacant building behind a house on Mason Turner Road, shot in the back of the head and stabbed twice. 8 days later, Curtis Lee Brown, 21, was found in an isolated corner of Dean Rusk Park on Peoples Street, shot twice, 1 round again to the back of the head. In March of 1986, Alvin George, 31, turned up in an alleyway with multiple stab wounds to the neck. In April, 18-year-old Jason McCauley was found in the same alleyway with the same wounds. That alleyway was a short walk from where Michael DeVern Terry slept. In September, a field near the freeway running out to Stone Mountain produced George Willingham, 30, shot 3 times in the head and stabbed, the only one of the 6 to be mutilated. In October, Darrell Williams, 20, was found in an abandoned apartment building on Harwell Street with a single shot to the back of the head. 5 of the 6 were naked from the waist down. All 6 went to different investigators as unrelated cases. That is the structural fact that let it run 11 months. Files that never touch cannot show a pattern, and victims that the city files under vice do not generate pressure. 2 detectives, Sheila Cumberworth and Marcellus Head, read across the cold cases anyway, and took a theory to their commanding lieutenant, Horace Walker, that one man was doing all of it. Walker sent the team back over the scenes. Every witness they found gave the same last sighting, a heavy-set black man known only as Mike. The name Michael Terry surfaced, and he lived beside two of the dump sites. He was arrested without incident in the last week of November 1986 at the tire recapping shop in Lithonia where he worked. He confessed to all six, then said in court he had only confessed because officers would not believe his account either way. His account was self-defense over money. Juries convicted him of 2 murders, then a third, and Justice John Langford imposed a life term rather than death. In June 1988, he pleaded guilty to the last 3 for 3 more consecutive life sentences. 6 men, 6 life terms, and 11 months of separate files. 2 detectives reading across paperwork is what stopped that one. 8 years later, a body in Reynoldstown came with a note, and the city was told to expect more. Section 6. Mr. X, in Reynoldstown. Reynoldstown sits just east of downtown, a narrow grid of cottages built for railroad workers, hemmed in by freight lines. In the early 1990s, it was one of the cheapest places in Atlanta to buy anything, including a person. Men drove in from the outer counties on Friday evenings and cruised the streets slowly. Women worked those streets to pay for crack, and some of them stopped coming back. The dump sites were a short walk from ground the city had already searched a decade earlier for missing children. On the 19th of October 1994, in high weeds beside a railroad track, the body of Valerie Payton was found. She was 39. She was nude, wrapped in a blanket, and she had been strangled. Over 50 incision wounds had been cut into her after death, which is a detail that tells investigators something specific. Wounds inflicted on a body that is no longer bleeding are not part of the killing. They are done afterwards, deliberately, by someone with time and no reason to hurry. Attached to her was a handwritten note announcing that Mr. X was back in Atlanta. That note reshaped the whole investigation. Homicide detectives already had a run of unsolved killings of women working the same streets, and the note read like a claim of ownership over all of them. Payton's death was linked publicly to as many as 7 or 8 others. Swabs were taken at autopsy and submitted, but the DNA technology available in 1994 was the older restriction fragment method, which needed larger, cleaner samples than most crime scenes give up. The tests returned no match. The case went cold with a named suspect who did not exist. What eventually moved it was a change in the law rather than a change in the case. From 2000, Georgia required DNA samples from every inmate in the state prison system and later from felons sentenced to probation. That turned the database into something that fills itself. In 2005, the Payton swabs matched Michael Darnell Harvey, a man with prison terms going back to 1980 for aggravated assault with intent to rape, burglary, and car theft. Her body had been left in an area he was known to frequent. He was arrested in 2008. He had been released from the state system the year before that. In 2010, a Fulton County jury convicted him of malice murder, rape, aggravated sodomy, and aggravated assault, and he received 3 consecutive life sentences. The Georgia Supreme Court upheld it. Sources note that 2 other men were convicted for 2 of the other Reynoldstown killings, and that Harvey was never formally connected to any of them. The note was never explained. Whether Mr. X was a real signature or a piece of theater remains unsettled, and always may be. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. A prison swab law solved a case a note had derailed. 8 years later, a killer in Midtown left a different kind of signature, tied around the wrists. Section 7. Howard Belcher and the Neckties Midtown in October of 2002 was a district of glass towers and low brick bars sitting side by side. On its quieter stretches, the nightlife was small and local. A bar called Bulldogs drew a mostly gay crowd, men who lived within a few miles and drove home afterwards, and it was the kind of room where a stranger who came in 3 weeks running would be remembered by the staff. That memory is the only reason the following month made sense to anyone. On the 5th of October, Mark Schaller, 40, was found in his condominium on Dutch Valley Road. He was partially undressed. His hands had been tied with a necktie. He had died of blunt force injury to the neck. 5 days later, in Paulding County, Matthew Abney was found in his own house. He was 43 and the assistant manager of a Walmart. He had met the same man at the same bar, taken him home, had sex with him, and been bound with a necktie and strangled. His jewelry and his car were gone. The gas oven had been left burning. That detail matters, because a man who takes a vehicle and leaves the gas on is not panicking. He is trying to destroy a room he has already finished with. In DeKalb County, 27-year-old Leroy Tyler was found dead at his home on North Indian Creek Drive. Around the 28th of October, Artillas McKinney, 35, of Duluth, died as well. No charge was ever brought in that case, because medical examiners could not state with confidence that it was a homicide. What ended it was the same impulse that had produced the evidence. On the 30th of October, Howard Milton Belcher was stopped in College Park driving McKinney's 1994 Lexus. He was 26 and had been out of state prison on unrelated charges for only a short time. The prosecutions ran in sequence rather than together because the deaths crossed 3 counties. In June of 2004, a Paulding County judge gave him life plus 20 years for Abney. Fulton County initially decided against capital punishment, then reversed in 2005. At his arraignment that January, in front of Judge Thelma Wyatt Cummings Moore, Belcher said plainly that he wanted the death penalty and thanked the court for it. Then the Schaller case simply stopped. Belcher was HIV positive and was not taking his medication, and the court had been advised he would not survive a trial. It sat unresolved for 6 years. In 2011, he appeared before Judge Wendy Shube well enough for her to push it forward, and he was convicted of that murder as well. Prosecutors did not pursue a death sentence in the end. Police believe 4 men died. 3 counties, 4 bodies, 1 bar. A stolen Lexus and a bar full of witnesses closed that one. 2 years later, a chef working double shifts in Norcross was already killing across 4 counties, and no file connected any of it. Section 8. Charles Carter and the Pawn Ticket. Norcross sits about 20 miles up the interstate from downtown Atlanta, a Gwinnett County town of extended stay hotels, chain restaurants, and warehouse parks. In one of those hotels, a man in his late 30s lived with his mother and worked as a chef, moving between kitchens as they opened and closed. Colleagues remembered him working double shifts and sleeping on a cot at the restaurant rather than going home. Sources report he asked coworkers not to let him go outside, because he might do bad things. On the day after Christmas 2005, Angela Thayer Green, 35, a mother of 6, was beaten and strangled at a friend's apartment in Norcross. Charles Lendell Carter turned up for his shift that day, with blood on his trousers. 2 things kept him invisible for 15 years. The first was geography. His killings fell in different counties, and in metropolitan Atlanta that means different police departments, different medical examiners, and different district attorneys, none of whom automatically read each other's open files. The second was that he had no signature at all. In 1992, Michael Leon Sneed, 35, was shot and dumped behind Henderson High School in DeKalb County. In October of 2004, April Allen, 38, an administrative assistant, was stabbed and sexually assaulted in her townhome in Atlanta. In January of 2006, Lisa Rosenthal, 40, a single mother of 2, was stabbed in the face and back at her home in Alpharetta and found by her son when he came home from school. A shooting, 2 stabbings, a strangling, 4 cases that look like 4 different men. What connected them was theft, which is the mistake that catches men who otherwise leave nothing. Rosenthal's son noticed gaming equipment and DVDs missing from the house. Fulton County detectives Glenn Kalish and Michael Lindstrom traced the discs to a pawn shop. One of them still carried the younger boy's fingerprint. The receipt had been signed by Carter. He avoided the subject of Rosenthal in interview and then began talking about everything else. He described himself in court as a monster, spoke of urges he could not control, of an abusive childhood, and of a fear that his son had inherited something from him. He told police that the faces of the people he had killed kept him from sleeping. His record before any of it was petty. 15 arrests between 1987 and 1997 for theft, deception, battery, aggravated assault, and traffic matters. Guilty pleas followed in Fulton and Gwinnett. By April of 2011, he had 3 life sentences, the last carrying an extra 20 years. He is a person of interest in the 2003 killing of 16-year-old Brittany King in Henry County, and detectives in 2 further counties have looked at him for other deaths. Investigators still do not know the total. Neither, by his own account, does he. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. A pawn ticket undid 15 years of separation. The next man was born in Atlanta and did his hunting in the mountains north of it, where there are no witnesses at all. Section 9. Gary Hilton and the Forest Blood Mountain is the highest point the Appalachian Trail reaches in Georgia, about 90 miles north of the city, above Vogel State Park in Union County. On New Year's Day, 2008, the car parks were busy with people walking off the holiday. A 24-year-old University of Georgia graduate named Meredith Emerson left a note for her roommate saying she was going up with her dog, then set off. Several people on the trail that morning noticed an older man in her vicinity and remembered him. The man was born in Atlanta on the 26th of November 1946. Gary Michael Hilton had served as an Army paratrooper, been honorably discharged in 1967 after a breakdown, married and divorced 3 times, and accumulated arrests for drunk driving, carrying an unlicensed gun, drug possession, and 21 counts of solicitation. By 2007, he lived out of a van fitted with survival gear, which is the entire logic of what followed. A man who lives in a vehicle in national forest land has no address to trace, no neighbors, and no fixed pattern for anyone to notice. Emerson fought him from the first moment. He pulled a knife and demanded her bank card, and she refused to stop resisting. He told investigators later that he punched her hard enough to break his own hand, and that she would not stop fighting or shouting. He held her for 4 days. He had killed before. In October of 2007, John and Irene Bryant, an elderly couple, were killed while hiking in a national forest in North Carolina. On the 1st of December, Cheryl Dunlap, a 46-year-old nurse and Sunday school teacher, disappeared from the Leon Sinks geological area in Florida. A hunter found her dismembered remains 2 weeks later in the Apalachicola National Forest. Because the earlier cases had already produced public appeals with a description, the tip line did the work. On the 5th of January, several callers reported a man matching it at a Chevron station near Vogel State Park, cleaning out a green van. Officers found blood evidence and Emerson's belongings inside it. He made a deal. He led investigators to her body in Dawson Forest, warning them in advance that the head would be missing, and pleaded guilty to avoid a Georgia death sentence. Sources differ slightly on the terms recorded, some describing life without parole and others life with parole, possible after 30 years. In his recorded interviews, he told agents he was a sociopath, and that if they opened the jail door and told him to sin no more, he would have to walk straight back in. Florida then tried him for Dunlap and sentenced him to death in 2011, upheld by the state Supreme Court in 2021. In April 2013, he took 4 life sentences in North Carolina for the Bryants. He remains on Florida's death row, with no execution date announced. A phone line and a witness description. That was all it took. 4 dead in 3 months, across 3 states, ended by a stranger noticing a man wiping out a van. The last name on this list was stopped by a subway ticket barrier. Section 10. Amon Presley, and what actually stopped them. On the 26th of September 2014, Calvin Golston, 53, was shot repeatedly as he slept outside a shopping center near Stone Mountain. A woman who found him told officers he had been living in that alley for at least 2 months. On the 23rd of November, Dorian Jenkins, 42, was shot while sleeping wrapped in blankets in Atlanta. 3 days later, Tommy Mims, 68, the same way. On the 6th of December, Karen Pierce, a 44-year-old hairdresser from Smyrna, was robbed and shot walking to her car in downtown Decatur. Amon Lovell Presley was a failed actor who had moved back from Los Angeles that year. 4 killings in 10 weeks, and he was caught on the 11th of December for dodging a MARTA fare at a downtown station. Officers searched him and found a silver Taurus revolver loaded with 5 hollow point rounds and a box holding 27 more. The homeless man had been shot with elongated .45 caliber bullets last manufactured in 2010. He pleaded guilty in DeKalb County in June 2016 before Judge Gregory Adams and received 2 consecutive life sentences without parole, then walked out of a Fulton County plea before finally taking it. He told the court he was not a serial killer, that he was a man with serious problems who had done things he was not proud of, and, of Golston, that he thought the man might be better off than living homeless on drugs. Look back down the whole list and the same fact keeps surfacing. Almost none of these people were caught by detection. The Ripper was never caught at all, and a grand jury solved him by declaring that 20 different men had each killed once. Roberta Elder was found because one coroner remembered 2 dead girls from the same address. Wayne Williams was found because officers sat under bridges in the dark. Michael Terry ran 11 months only because 6 files sat on 6 different desks. Michael Darnell Harvey was found by a law requiring prison swabs, 6 years after the swab was taken. Howard Belcher was stopped driving a dead man's Lexus. Charles Carter was undone by a pawn receipt with a child's fingerprint on the disc. Gary Hilton was reported by strangers who saw a man cleaning a van, and underneath that, one selection rule, held constant for a century. Cooks walking home in the dark, children sent out on errands, street hustlers on King Drive, women in Reynoldstown, men sleeping in blankets behind a shopping center. Every single one chosen because their absence would take the longest to be noticed, and their file the longest to be opened. What finally stopped them was paperwork, a swab, a receipt, and a fare gate. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.